Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 181 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network. I'm Ryan Coop here, joined this evening by the great Michael Garrell. Mike, a little sleep deprived, a lot of hockey, minimal sleep for you this week. How are you doing this evening, bud?
I'm good. I was able to catch 2 of the 4 football games live. I recapped the other 2 thanks to my friend known as PBR. So just so I know a little bit smart about what I'm talking about tonight.
Right on. And myself, I'm back finally from vacation. Was gone for 2 weeks. Got to get away for a nice little vacation there. My sister-in-law had her wedding out by destination wedding out in the mountains, so we got away to Banff for a couple week trip. And I handed over the keys to the podcast car to Mike, Adam, and Trey, and I spent a lot of time in a car myself driving. But listening to you all recap and preview the weeks in the CFL made the long drives through the fields of Manitoba and Saskatchewan go a little bit smoother. So kudos to the three of you for an awesome job while I was away. And not gonna lie, Mike, I started to question whether I even had a job when I came back because you all did so well while I was gone.
Yeah. That's kind of like that quarterback that they have in Dallas with the Cowboys right now. Number 1 Diane Prescott goes down. The starters 3-0. Cooper Rush 4-0 if you go back to last year. And now it looks like Prescott's ready to come back. And, there's a lot of self-manufactured quarterback controversy. I reckon that to be the same here. There is no quarterback controversy. You are back in your chair where you belong.
Yes, happy to be back. Happy to talk some more football here this evening. We're here to recap Week 17 in the CFL. We're going to switch up the format a little bit. Instead of going game by game specifically here, we're the Canadian Football Countdown. So we're going to try this out. We're going to count down our top storylines from around the CFL this week. We'll bounce around a little bit here and there. We'll update our CFL Fantasy and our betting results, give our players of the week, and update our power rankings as well. We are also live on a variety of different platforms, all made possible by our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV, which you can learn more about at GameTimeTV.ca or by following on Facebook at Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. We'll take your comments, we'll take your questions throughout the night. Trey is joining the folks in the YouTube chat also here. Mike, he wants you to tell them how great your color guy was yesterday. Yes, Trey getting in on the hockey broadcast with you a little bit there as well.
Yes, he did very well. So much so that he was invited back for Thursday night. So I'm assuming he accepted that invitation. Got a big early season battle for first place in the way too early 3 games into the season standings.
Right on. Awesome to see. I love to see it. Before we go any further, as always, we do want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. I'd also like to take a quick moment to thank one of our sponsors for this episode of the podcast, BetStamp. There are so many different sports books out there these days, and each one offers you different prices on the same game. Well, how do you ensure you're getting the best value? BetStamp gives you all of the info you need in one convenient place at no additional cost. You simply pull up the game. You can see the odds offered by all the different sports books affiliates, and you can you can take a look, find the one that's going to maximize the return for the pick you want to make. You can sign up for the corresponding site directly through the BetStamp BetLink page. Link your accounts to easily track the wagers you make. And if you want extra insight, you can check the commission-free marketplace on BetStamp as well, where you can see the bets that others have placed. And through their verified bet tracking, you get the guarantee that the odds shown are verified and legitimate. You can find our consensus CFL picks there every single week under the username CF Countdown Pod. You can also see Trey's picks there as well at Trey CF Countdown. Visit betstamp.com app or download the free app from your local app store. Use referral code CFC today. Best of luck with your wagers. And remember, always bet responsibly. All right, Mike. Well, let's get into our first topic here this evening as we talk about some breaking news we got, I believe it was yesterday here in the CFL, which is that the Ottawa Red Blacks have fired head coach Paul LaPolice. Special teams coordinator Bob Dice named the interim head coach for the rest of the season. Your quick thoughts, initial thoughts on this move here by the Red Blacks?
I have a love-hate relationship with this move. But let me quickly expand on that. I hate that Paul LaPolice got fired. I love that Bob Dice is the interim coach. How does that make sense? I don't know. You rationalize it for yourself. But again, to be honest with you, I don't like this. I don't like this for a number of reasons. I don't think LaPolice has been put in a very good position to have success. I think this is an Ottawa team that has more holes than meets the eye. Contrary to what we thought in the season of them taking the step. To me, this would have been the preeminent move to the Bombers firing Michael Shea when things didn't go well 4 years into the tenure. They had every reason to do that. They never did. That's where the Bombers are now. So this coach gets you halfway out of the hole, and he can't finish his own job. Granted, but I don't think he's got the talent around him to be successful. I think he was left on his own to defend just his track record. It's a crappy situation, and I don't like it.
I'm completely on the other side of this from you. I think this should have happened weeks ago, and I think now is the perfect time for it to happen. It was that game against Toronto 2 weeks ago was the final straw, basically, where all of a sudden, what did you say last Monday? Toronto put up 35 points off of turnovers or something like that. Ottawa was a mess after that game. Then they had the short week going in and playing against BC. Well, they're not going to do it then. Now they have 9 or 10 days off before their next game here. If you're going to do it, now's the time to do it. I think it's also the perfect time you get a 4 or 5 game trial in here for Bob Dice before you go into the offseason where, yeah, he seems like he could be a decent head coach, but you're going into next year now where you get at least a bit of a trial run with him, and then you can decide, okay, do you want to extend that to another year for him next season as head coach, or do you want to go out in the market in the offseason and do it? I think it's something we've talked about. I mean, we've been talking about this since week 4, week 5, week 6. Like this came up on the podcast every week all season long is LaPolice in over his head? Is it time to let LaPolice go? Initially, I thought the roster needed time to gel. But I think there are some solid pieces there on this roster to succeed. And I just don't think Paul LaPolice has been making the most out of them. He hardly ever does when he's the head coach, it seems. I think he's better suited as an offensive coordinator. And I'm interested to see where he goes next. But I like the timing for Ottawa to make this move now to give Dice some time at the end of the season.
Really quickly, who's the new OC in Ottawa?
Ooh. I don't know.
Does LaPolice have both titles?
Well, they've got a couple of guys on that roster. I believe a few former Bombers, right? Fred Reed, I think, is one of the part of the coaching staff there. Alex Suber, I think, is a part of the coaching staff there.
I never envisioned Fred Reed to be an offensive coordinator type. I guess we're about to find out.
Not going to lie, I didn't even know he was on the coaching staff. I didn't even know he was still in the realm of the CFL at all.
Yeah, it's just interesting. But again, Bob Dice in the same type of situation. What does he need to do to get the job beyond next year? Or beyond this last stretch of the season? Like, to me, this is about getting a head start on your coach for next year. And then if you know he's not going to come back, why not just let him finish the year? It's not like you're going to make the playoffs.
No, I think playoffs are done pretty much at this point for Ottawa. I mean, technically, if you want to look at the CFL standings, I think they can still make it. But this roster, the way this team has been playing, unless there's a miracle happening here, they're not going on to make the playoffs. This year is as good as done for them. So you're
I'll,
playing into
I'll make
next
the
year mode.
I'll
You know
make the bold,
Lapalisse is not going to be the guy for next year. You already know that at this point. So you make the move now and you let Dice do it.
I'll make the bold prediction. The new coach of the Ottawa Redblacks, Craig Dickinson.
For next season, of course.
Yes, for next year, yeah.
I like it. Spicy. I like it. Well, we could see some coaches trading places but this week, Mike, we could see some players trading pieces as well, places as well as we move on to our next topic here, which is the CFL trade deadline taking place 2 days from now, Wednesday, October 5th. We don't see trades too often in the CFL. This is not like your NHL free agent frenzy. We're not doing an 8-hour. We did an 8-hour show for free agency. We're not doing it for the trade deadline because that would just be 8 hours of mostly silence because very few trades happen. But the last few years, there have been some key ones. The Zach Collaros trade to Winnipeg in 2019 comes to mind. The technically a trade, Sergio Castillo for the 4th round pick to the Bombers in 2021. So 2 championship teams that made key additions at the trade deadline. So what's on tap for this Wednesday? What do you think, Mike? Are there teams that you're looking at that you think could maybe, benefit from making a deal here down the stretch? Or who do you have your eye on this week to make a splash potentially?
I actually have my eye on Saskatchewan. And the reason I say that is, do they move some pieces around and try to gain some currency for next year? What does Ottawa's GM do with a new coach, presumably temporary interim coach? Does he move some pieces? But again, it's a trade deadline, more like a date on the calendar with 1 or 2 moves. It's not like the contenders are gonna move pieces around in the Blue Bombers. Maybe. Um, but for me, Bo Levi Mitchell is a possibility. If you want to do it, do I think it's gonna happen? No. Do I think he's a candidate? Yes. Um, do we go as far as Cody Fajardo? I don't think so. But those to me, I see a lot of white as days a standstill. I'm a Bombers. I might try to get a couple DNs in here. Um, Granted, because you don't know what the status is of Jackson Jeffcoat and a couple other guys. Um, Other than that, I mean, it's been pretty quiet. Montreal's made a couple trades this year, more trades than in recent years. Adam suggested Micah Tights and a first for Bo Levi Mitchell. Yeah,
That would be an enticing move for me if I'm Calgary, I got to say.
well, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because Saskatchewan's depth is defensively. They have a lot of linebackers led by Larry Dean and Darnell Sainty, so they're trading from a position of strength. I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure that that's going to help them because, quite honestly, if Saskatchewan loses this game, to me, it's all over. I think you could throw the crossover away. Remarkably, absolutely remarkably, throw the crossover away. But that being said, the Bombers, when they traded for Kolaros, had reason to do it, had time to do it. The team that would acquire Bo Levi Mitchell in this scenario does not have time to do it. So, with that in mind, it's not like he's going to be in the lineup in 2 days after being acquired. Sorry, it's just not going to happen.
I also don't think that if you're Saskatchewan, unless you don't think Cody Fajardo is going to stick around long term, I don't think you make that deal because I would take Fajardo over Bo Levi Mitchell at their current points in their careers. I'm not taking Bo as my quarterback, for sign him long term, unless I'm a team like maybe Ottawa, Hamilton, who has a ton of quarterback questions. Like I don't think Bo at this point in his career is
And
that high up.
I think here's another thing: we never should undervalue when Huff and Dickinson say, that's it. It's time to move on. They know shelf life of players. They're not dumb. If Bo Levi Mitchell was a good quarterback and could help the Stampeders and would be their starting quarterback, he would be their starting quarterback. The other thing, I think this is a trade like what Adam is proposing that would make the most sense after the season, especially from Saskatchewan. And by the way, Saskatchewan always has, I was speaking with somebody about this morning. Saskatchewan always has a thing about it's the quarterback's fault. It's the quarterback's fault. It's the quarterback's
Most places do.
Yeah, it's just like in the NHL. It's the goalie's fault. It's the goalie's fault. Sounds like somewhere else we know. But from Saskatchewan, if you're really willing to make that move, isn't it cheaper to do it in the off season? To me, Micah Tights in a first round is a very steep price. And it's not like that's going to help you solve your problems.
No,
So
I
to me, I'm of the mindset that if there's a smallest trade to be made by anybody, that's what it's going to be. But I
well,
think,
can I throw one potential trade? And I don't think I've seen this talked about anywhere, but this is
go
the
ahead.
first guy that comes to mind to me that I think a couple playoff teams should be looking at here. We just talked about Ottawa.
Devontae
That
Dedman.
No, well, that's another interesting one. But Ottawa, out of the playoffs most likely. They've got a new head coach. They brought in a couple guys in the offseason who were very much Paul Lapolis players. Are they still Bob Dice players? I don't know. I'm talking about a guy like Darvin Adams, I would like to see traded to a contending team here because receiver, he's still a solid receiver. He's not going to be your top 10 receiver anymore. But what he normally brings is the value in the run blocking for his team as well, right? Like that was a huge piece of what he did here in Winnipeg. So can a team like BC, who just lost Brian Burnham to a 6-game injured list, could they bring in a guy like Darvin Adams potentially? Also help James Butler in that run game. Could Toronto maybe fit him in? I know they're kind of stacked at receiver, but get that run game going. Does Montreal potentially make a pitch? I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's out there on the trade block. But I don't know if that's necessarily a player at this point in his career that, the Red Blacks are looking to build long-term around. So if you can get an asset for him, it's guys like that I would like to see traded more often in the CFL because I think there are deals that could be made.
Yeah, Adam brings up an interesting point about Jeremy L. David. I wanna talk about, but yeah, just to get back to it, that's one area where I think Winnipeg could get a little bit of help. Is receiver. Granted, we don't know what the status is of Drew Wolotarski, and we don't know what the status is of Greg Ellington, neither of which, to my knowledge, has practiced in the last couple of weeks. Ellington for sure not, because he's on the sixth game. Wolotarski, not exactly sure what his status is. But again, if you're Winnipeg, right, you're in that position of you have a magic number of two, one BC loss, one Winnipeg win, or one head-to-head Winnipeg win against BC, and that West Finals going to Winnipeg. It's very interesting. Because I think if you're Winnipeg and you lock up the West, say this week or next week, I think you can afford to wait for those guys to be ready for one game in November too. So unless you know for sure that somebody's not coming back, DBs for the Bombers might be a bit of a need if there's somebody out there. Some of those kids are starting to show that they're kids on that line. It's very interesting, right? You gotta pick your poison because I think a lot of teams have weaknesses. I don't think there's a perfect team in any league. Everybody has weaknesses, especially in the CFL. It's just what are you going to tolerate? What can you um, manage to hide, for lack of a better term, um, going forward? Quickly about Jeremy all day here because I know I hope Jeremy all day doesn't do something stupid. Um, Because if Jeremy Alday makes a big trade, save his job, it's gonna come across as desperate. But that's me. I do not expect anything earth shattering on Wednesday.
Yeah, Adam throws a couple other ideas out in the chat. Darrell Walker potentially as a target. I mean, is Edmonton going to be in sell mode maybe with some of those veteran receivers when they've got guys like Dylan Mitchell up and coming? Yeah, I could see that potentially. Or the Manny show going back to BC. I know he's injured. I'm not quite sure when he's supposed to come back off the injured list. Like, I think there are more trades to be made on any given year than do happen in the CFL. I think the big reason they don't is because you can overhaul your entire roster in the offseason. But maybe, just maybe, the two-time champs making back-to-back crucial trades that led to their Grey Cup victories over the last 2 years entices somebody around the league to make a deal to try to push them over the top to win that Grey Cup this year. And speaking of the Grey Cup, we're to the point of the season now, Mike, where the CFL simulation of the greatest odds to make the playoffs, make the finals, make the Grey Cup come out every single week. And they came out today, and everybody is up in arms over the team that has listed with about 40% the greatest odds to win Grey Cup 2022. And it is the Calgary Stampeders. I got to say, I was taken aback when I first saw this. Now, I'm high on Calgary. I said preseason, I think that they would be in the finals. I think I had Calgary and Toronto as my
Yeah.
team in the final. I think even up to a couple weeks ago, I was pushing. I think Calgary could be the team to beat still out west. They're looking pretty good. They are a good team, but I don't understand the math here because
Well, Ryan, you're a computer guy. You should know the answer to this.
I don't know what kind of simulation and what kind of odds they're running there, man, because to me, they can't finish first in the West. They are going to play 2 games in the playoffs, no matter what, if they're going to go all the way. They got to play, presumably, BC, maybe Winnipeg in the first round, beat them. Then they got to play the other one in the second round. Then they got to play in the finals against the team out east, which I think you guys had kind of talked about this on the podcast last week about Toronto, having a very good option to go to the Cup out east, presumably win the division, win 1 game. And that's why Toronto had the highest odds last week. But to me, this just doesn't, like, what is it about Calgary, do you think, that people are seeing? They had a big win this week. Big, what was it, 29-2 win here for the
Yeah.
Stampeders. They really shut down that Argos offense. That defense did a fantastic job here. And kudos to them on that one. But this is a team that's still sitting, right now, third in the West Division, has the greatest odds to go on to win the Grey Cup. What do you make of this?
Well, it's just weird because to me, like, if you look at Calgary's record, there's something like undefeated or one loss if you take out all their Winnipeg and all their BC games. Um,
I think they are undefeated then, yeah.
yeah, but the issue becomes you got to beat both those teams just to get to the Grey Cup. You know what I mean? Um, it seems like to me more of the team that's hottest at the moment at this point in time. Uh, I would not dispute the fact that I think Calgary is the hottest team in the league at the moment.
I think you might later on, Mike, based on what we talked about earlier.
Well, true that, true that. But yeah, I just don't know. And to be honest with you, I do not want to spend time getting my shorts in a knot because football is a one game. I like the first place team's chances of winning 1 game to get to the Grey Cup. However, I believe there was a preemptive message sent. How I think even the gap between the top ranked team in the East, which is Toronto right now, and I say right now because I think, spoiler alert, I don't think they're going to win the East Division. Um, but the game, if you look at the game that was this week, Calgary showed that even the third best team in the West took down the East top team with relative no real drama. So I don't know. Are they thinking this is going to be 2019 third place team in the West going on a run? Because to me, There are no expectations in Calgary. You've lost to both of these teams all season long. I think any win would thrill Calgary fans, never mind two. To me, Calgary's playing with house money and probably has the best defense of the two teams ahead of them.
I don't think so. They have the best. See, it's tricky. They have the best big play defense, but they also, well, I'd say they give up the most yards and points, which I still think they do give up the most of them. But Winnipeg's kind of trending in that direction with the yardage there as well. But I found on the odds sheet there is the model that they use, and it considers the following: each team's current win-loss record, opponents already played, margin of victory in games previously played in the season, remaining opponents to play. Most recent results, a recent win is weighted more heavily than a win back in week one, for example. Home and away records are included in here. And the model calculates each team's probability of victory in each remaining game. It then simulates 100,000 replications of the remaining season schedule and playoff bracket and keeps track of a number of different things. And out of that all, they determined that Calgary is at 40%, 40.64% the odds to win the Grey Cup this year. So, sometimes statistics can predict these things. Sometimes, as much as we want to predict ahead of time, we don't know how the playoffs are going to play out. Last year, they were insane. We had Cody Fajardo and Cody Fajardo and Bo Levi Mitchell in round one in the playoffs, trade picks back and forth all day long. Fajardo throws 4 picks, goes on to win. Then they come into Winnipeg, and Winnipeg throws like 5 turnovers, 6 turnovers, and wins. It was crazy last year. So we can talk about these odds. We can nitpick. We don't know what's going to happen.
That thing that you just read me takes on remaining schedule. Okay, so Winnipeg doesn't have 2 left with BC. That changes the metrics. Like to me, I'm struggling with the fact of I understand they have their formula and it's 100,000 simulation. That still doesn't make a lot of sense. But nonetheless, the bottom line, the game is played on the field. And hello, Steve, in the comments. A new viewer chiming in. I spoke with him today, so I'm glad that he found our show.
Right on. Welcome here this evening, and Adam may have the best summary of this. That maybe the CFL has a secret Madden-like video game, and we're just running the simulation on that. If they do, could they please make it public for everybody? We want the Madden game. We've been over this many times, and we definitely want it. Well, Mike, speaking of simulations, how many times do you think we have to simulate the Edmonton Elks playing at home before we get them finally winning a game here? As Mike steps away for a second, he will be right back. But I'm starting to question whether Commonwealth Stadium is cursed, because the Elks have officially broken the pro football record for longest home losing streak across CFL, across NFL. It just seems to never end. And I picked the Elks to win this past week. I thought they were going to do it. I liked the way they've played lately. I liked that Montreal, or I didn't like what I had seen from Montreal necessarily. I still wasn't sold on them. And Edmonton, they were doing pretty good. They were hanging in there in this game. They were, making their way throughout the game. Seemed like they got a lead at some point. Okay, then they turned it over again on a pick six. Taylor Cornelius, throws ball. It's tipped at the line, goes all the way back the other way. Tyrese Beverette, interception there for pick six for the Alouettes. Then Edmonton, they march back down the field, and it seems like they're about to score, and then they get stopped on 3 tries from the 5-yard line. Oh, then they get the ball back. A big kick return for like the first time this year. They get one of those, and then good field position, and then intercepted again. Like the Elks just can't buy a win at this point, can they? My Commonwealth Stadium is officially cursed.
It's very interesting. It's kind of like Tim Hortons Field, the polar opposite. Remember, nobody could win there when they first opened up because everybody was convinced it was the donut bots. Still is. I call it the donut bots. But a lot more teams have won there of late. Like this is just some kind of unbelievable. I know we've touched on this on the podcast before. Edmonton and Ottawa. You think they'd have some kind of handshake agreement to each win in their own buildings? That didn't happen. That opposite happened. But let's be frank. For our friends at the Turf District podcast, I feel so bad for those individuals plus the fans of the Edmonton Outs who deserve better. It certainly doesn't help Victor Quee's, how do you pronounce his name? Business model. Uh, Taking losses on the field doesn't necessarily translate to people in seats. However, it does sound like they have a high season ticket renewal, from my understanding, considering the circumstances.
Much better than
But
last year for sure.
yeah, so business is growing that way, but I just like what's it gonna take to win at home? Like I can remember days in I don't even know if you remember this, but the late 2000s, the mid 2000s, teams couldn't buy a win in Montreal for the longest time. And now it's like the opposite, where teams can seemingly go into Edmonton and go into Ottawa, and that's the free space on the bingo card. To me, it's just it's not even funny at this point because you'd think an opponent would come in there and not play well, not have an off night for once, right? That would be your assessment. The fact that this is the CFL record still
A pro football record, NFL included.
that's
And
just
didn't the
interesting.
Cleveland Browns, sorry, Adam, didn't they not win a game an entire season?
The Detroit Lions.
Oh, the Detroit
The
Lions. Sorry,
Lions and
Adam.
I think the Browns were another team that did it, but there was a Detroit team that didn't win a game as well. There's been a couple, uh, but yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because and you'd think that that would not be an issue. Oh, Adams at the Browns too, yeah. So it's interesting because I don't believe that Edmonton has played that badly the last number of weeks. Um, they could have easily have won a couple games the way they played the last, 4 to 6 weeks, let's say. And Steve tells me it's the 2008 Lions. Uh, Thank you, Steve. But yeah, no. So it's very interesting that way. And is it coincidence? Is it a curse? Don't know because remember we couldn't go into Ottawa and buy a win when that franchise first came in. It's funny. It's just one of those things. But sports is strange, right? Much like the game of baseball. If I may equate that to this example, you watch enough baseball, chances are you'll see stuff on occasion that you only see once or you've seen once in the last 10 years. It's and when you watch enough sports, I'm sure you've seen everything, but there's something that you've never seen before, but always seem to happen. It's it's just one of those things that I feel so bad for Edmonton because it seems like Chris Jones left the first time, and that's when this downward spiral kind of started. And Victor's had to go in there and he's had to do damage repair from, let's just say, the negative. Um, let's just say the negative, you know, business that they had for a while there. Um, you know, get back into the break even ledger and then start moving 2 steps forward. It's a long process, but we can't just I can't for the life of me figure out that why they haven't won at least one game.
Even this week, like Montreal took over 100 yards in penalties again and gave Edmonton an entire drive just based on penalties, basically. That ended up, they just couldn't punch it in at the end. I think that was the drive. But I don't know. It's weird. Every time they have 2 home games left this year, week number 19, or they go on the road to Winnipeg this week. Then they are at home to Toronto, week 19, and at home to BC week 20. Do you see, quick yes or no, do you see the Elks breaking that streak against Toronto or BC here yet this season, or are we going
Yes, yeah,
into
I
another
do.
year?
I do because I really don't see this going into 23. I think they're going to beat BC. And the
Ooh.
narrative is going to be because BC didn't sit all those starters in preparation for a playoff game against Calgary.
With 2 weeks left in the season, you think it'll be locked up versus Calgary at that point for BC already?
I think so because I remember there's a Winnipeg game in there after this week. If Winnipeg wins this week and BC loses this week, that clinches the West for Winnipeg. If Winnipeg beats BC in that first game, that also clinches the West. So, but again, I mean, if it comes down to how much do you value home field, right? And if that's still at stake, then maybe you don't. But
Yeah, if you're Edmonton and Ottawa right now, you don't value home field at all. You want nothing to do with it. They would love to go on the road for a playoff game, but unfortunately, it looks like that will not be the case this year. But let's move on to our
maybe they
next.
should play all their games on the road and just be done with it.
There we go. That's the strategy. Perfect. Mike, let's move on to our next topic here, and
Yep.
I'll let you talk about a guy that I know is near and dear to your heart. He's on your fantasy team. You picked him in our fantasy draft. You're very excited to watch him play this year, and that's Winnipeg Blue Bombers wide receiver Dalton Schoen, who set the Bombers record for most receiving touchdowns in his rookie season with 11 this week. He also passed 1,000 receiving yards. Tell us a little bit about just what you've seen from Dalton Schoen this year and how important he's been to the success of the Bombers.
Dalton Schoen ain't your average rookie. That's the best way to put it. Um, Michael Shea, I've been told the TV broadcast this week that or the broadcasters anyway that he was a professional. He's been a professional since day one. Um, we've seen rookies have an impact, throughout the year, but we've seen them drop off on occasion. You have a good 8 week stretch, you have a good 10 week stretch. Teams start to figure you out, and then you kind of fall off a little bit. To me, I see it the exact opposite. I Dalton Schoen's gotten better as the years gone on. And the interesting part about, Dalton Schoen is I would compare him to a guy like Ben Cahoon. You know? Everybody kind of says, but Greg Ellington is Mr. Second Down, but he hasn't been around. Um, and I think it was Adam and I that had this discussion. Um, I think Adam and I had this discussion. I think it was Adam. Uh, but it was basically that to have a rookie do what he's doing, and then you lose Darvin Adams, and you lose Kenny Lawler, and you lose Ellington for most of the year, and you lose Drew Wolatarski. Well, enter Brendan O'Leary Orange, enter Dalton Schoen, and enter uh, O'Leary Orange.
Carlton
Yeah,
Hagadosi came in
and
for a
then
couple
Rasheed
games.
Bailey stepping up too, and you know Greg McRae stepping in. It goes to show that you do not need a $300,000 receiver to have success. And I might did a point this at Kenny Lawler who got hurt in that game, you know, on first game back from missing 3 weeks. Sure, but this is as close to a slam dunk of a Rookie of the Year award as there's going to be. You don't even need to take a vote as far as I'm concerned. If this is anything but Dalton Schoen won on the ballots for everybody, then you clearly haven't been paying attention. This is a guy to me that had a very quiet game on Friday for the most part, but he always makes that one big catch. Start quiet, 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 quiet. And then he comes out of the weeds and he makes that big catch, to set the Bomber offense in motion. Sorry, guys. Enjoy Dalton Show. I'm always here because 2023 might not have a Dalton Show in the Blue Bomber lineup.
Yeah, and I feel like, in the CFL, we really don't have such huge expectations for rookies playing their first game, right? Like we don't have a ton of expectations coming into the year. We had some for Dalton Schoen. We saw flashes in training camp, but surely we couldn't have expected this. And you look at the NFL where okay, you look at your first round draft picks, there's been a number of wide receivers this year that are super hyped up across the board. One was playing in London yesterday. Chris Olave, a big game for him yesterday, stepping up for the Saints. Yeah, look at me flexing my NFL knowledge. I'm into it this year. But Dalton Schoen has been an incredible addition, and you're right. There's no question about it. He's the rookie of the year. I don't even know who else you'd put up against him for that award. And it's incredible to see. And kudos to the Bombers scouting department for getting that one done. Moving on to
And
our.
it just goes to show that they're a lot smarter than the NFL scouts once in a while.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, the scouting department has done a fantastic job. Well, you mentioned earlier on in the show, Mike, that you're not necessarily taking Toronto to finish first in the East Division. So, well, we based on our conversation, we're not talking Ottawa. Probably not talking Hamilton. I have a feeling you're talking about the Montreal Alouettes, who did pull out the win against the Elks here in this week's game. I was surprised when I looked at the schedule. 5 wins in the last 6 games for the Montreal Alouettes. They're 1 win back of first in the East behind Toronto. Is this a dark horse team that we're all sleeping on here going down the stretch? Because I think I am. I don't think I've been high on them all season. Like I picked Edmonton to win this week because I didn't make much of Montreal. And maybe it's because of the chaos of their penalties every single week and all the discipline talk around them and everything that I just haven't been sold on Montreal to this point. And I think some of their depth has been questionable. But this is a team that's winning football games right now, and they're doing so at the perfect time of the year. And for me, I think you talked about this with Adam last Monday a little bit. The big thing is William Stanback is coming back in a week or two here for the Alouettes. And is that going to be the one extra force they need to push them over the top here?
To be looked at it, the running back is their one missing kind of ingredient. They've had Walter Fletcher, they've had Antwi. Um, they had a running game, but looked pretty good for half a game until he went down in week 1. Um, running game is kind of that one question, right? And Adam keeps referring to them as the Montreal Buckleys. I'm assuming that's because it tastes awful, but it works.
I love it.
Something to that effect. Um, but no, I just think if you look at their remaining schedule, 2 with Ottawa, home and away, and then 2 with Toronto, which could loom very, very large. Um, granted, the reason I am going to say that first place goes to Montreal is quite simply this. Toronto's defense, um, as good as they've been, I don't think they can keep up the pace of scoring a lot of points. They have seemingly 1 or 2 pit sixes a game, or 1 or 2 pits in which they set their offense up pretty good. Case in point, I think it was the game 2 weeks ago. Now, move ahead to last week. It was, Calgary, and this was a measuring stick game for Toronto. They still have a ways to go in my mind. I'm hesitant to suggest that, Toronto is a good team. They are, but they play a lot of teams in their division that aren't necessarily that good. You put them up against a Western team. Granted, they're a missed point after away from going to overtime with the Bombers early in the season. Uh, that that is very, very good. But I like where Montreal is defensively. I like where Toronto is defensively. Um, I like where Montreal is with Trevor Harris. But I, for the life of me, if there's one thing that scares the you know what out of me, Ryan, it's the ineffectiveness of Jake Winnity. I just like I can't figure it out. He to me seems very, very quiet compared to where I had him slotted. I had him as a top five receiver in the CFL coming into this year. You know, you could beg to differ on with me on that one if you want,
No, I
but
was there. I was there too on him. Yeah.
and I think that's a scary proposition. But we have yet to see the best of Jake Winnity. And if Jake Winnity can start kind of building off what they're doing with Geno Lewis and a couple of these other big name receivers that have suddenly emerged, I think Montreal is going to be a big, big problem. And I'm not so sure that I'm ready to anoint Toronto as the East representative quite yet.
I was a couple weeks ago. Like I was saying a few weeks ago that yeah, I think Toronto's my current favorite to win the cup this year because they go into the playoffs, they win that lighter East division. The West is going to be a dogfight. Then you go on to play in the finals. I think Trey had said the same thing as well. We were on the same page with that one. But now seeing this with Montreal and knowing Stanback's coming back, like that could be a huge boost. I think William Stanback is the best running back in the CFL. I think Kadeem Carey's getting there. I think that's a close conversation between those two. But Stanback to me, when healthy, is the best back in the CFL. So you add that into that offense where right now they've been splitting the run game here and there. That bolsters it a little bit more. That's a huge weapon for them to use. Maybe that takes some extra pressure off of Trevor Harris here and there. If the defense can play up to the level they've played most weeks, yeah, I think they have as good a shot as anybody at this point to get in the playoffs. And what a story that would be. Guy goes down week 1 due to injury, misses the entire season, comes back in October, and just turns it up a notch and leads this team on to win a Grey Cup and wins Grey Cup MVP perhaps in the middle of it. I could see a situation where that happens with Stanback here. I'm still so scared though that it's going to come down to a crucial moment in a playoff game, much like Adam says in the chat. It just can't get high on a 100+ yard penalty team in the playoffs. It's going to come down to something, down to the wire. They need a defensive stop in the playoffs, and they're going to take a pass interference call that's going to put a team in field goal position that they're going to go on to kick the game-winning field goal. That's how I see it ending for Montreal, unfortunately. And as much as I think Stanback can propel them to that next level to take them all the way, I think it's going to end for Montreal in heartbreaking fashion in the playoffs if they don't get that discipline together. But that's the thing. If they can show they can down the stretch, then they're my favorite perhaps because, 5 wins in the last 6 games. Huge for Montreal. And they've got a good shot, like you mentioned, to win that East division.
And suddenly that third place team, whether it's Hamilton or Saskatchewan, isn't exactly a pushover either.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it's that easy of a fight any day for any teams in the CFL playoffs. I think it's so unpredictable. We're gonna have to make predictions. I guess 4 weeks from now on our official predictions, and I might have to get the lucky coin out for some of those again because it's going to be tough, Mike. It's going to be tough. But you mentioned the Saskatchewan Rough Riders there a little bit, and this week they fell to Winnipeg Blue Bombers again. And the Riders faltered, but boy, did Cody Fajardo put up a fight in this week's game. This is a guy that, the team, they were down and out late in the game. They lost 31-13. It seemed down the final drives as the defense just gave up. I think Brady Oliveira ran like 50-something yards on one drive alone, just 10 yards after 10 yards after 10 yards. A lot of the guys, it seemed like there wasn't a ton of fight in this game. But I got to give kudos to Cody Fajardo. It's been a bleak season for the Riders, and things aren't looking fantastic right now, obviously. They've got a huge matchup coming up with the Hamilton Tiger Cats this coming week. But this is a guy who is coming out in the media and saying it's been really hard on him to get all the boos from the crowd, and he's feeling definitely the pressure and the heat over here in Saskatchewan for the pressure on the team to win from the fans and things like that. And he knows the bulk of it is on him. And he knows he's playing beyond just this season. If he is a free agent coming into next year, is this a guy that wants to come back into Saskatchewan, or is this a guy that's going to look for a big payday from somewhere, say like Ottawa, right? So, yeah, the situation's looking bleak here. But I was encouraged by a lot of what I saw from Fajardo, and it wasn't all pretty. I know in our
It,
group chat, we were chatting a little bit about the game, and Adam made some good points. He was forcing balls downfield when he had an open receiver closer, but I saw a lot of Fajardo, who we talked about injury issues and concerns earlier in the season, was throwing himself into the line of fire with a couple big runs here, with a couple rollout passes here in this one. I saw a lot of effort from him on a team that seems like lately at times there hasn't been a ton. So that's my takeaway. Rough game for the Riders here. Real tough one for them. But you got to give it to Cody Fajardo here, right, Mike? What do you think's happening? What do you think happens with him down the stretch here and coming into next season?
I think I saw enough to show me that Cody Fajardo cares. The question is, what are they going to do to surround him with some help? Um, it's something different every week. Food poisoning, touchdown Atlantic, uh, injuries, you name it. There's no excuse for a couple of the plays that I saw from Saskatchewan, most notably the guy dropping a wide open pass in the end zone, uh, which would have given Saskatchewan the lead, I think, at the time in the fourth quarter. Then the Bombers turned it around, and literally that drop was like the straw that woke up the giant, basically. Um, but then there was that one play that was near the sideline, and Fajardo throws the ball, and to me, there's just no other way to see it than the guy stopped. Um, to me, I think the excuse that he thought it was going out of bounds is a little bit soft to me. Um, Kevin Jones is to me a guy that's fighting for a job for next year that I think is easily replaceable. He didn't do a good job to me to to he didn't put enough on tape for me to consider that he's going to be a returning player with that kind of effort.
Yeah,
Um,
that was terrible. I don't know what was happening on that interception. Tevin Jones just gave up.
and credit to the Bomber defender for seeing what was going on and being alert with the situation. Um, but again, that's not Fajardo's fault. Fajardo's tried. He's had a lot of a running game. He's had a lot of an offensive line. He's had an offensive line but can't help him because Dan Clark unfortunately can't stay healthy. He
Hey, he was back
has
this week.
he has a D line that cannot get any pressure on the quarterback whatsoever, and that's a big problem. And that's not just it's happened ever since Garrett Marino was released.
But he would tell you it has.
Well, he would tell you if you look at um, if you look at um, if you look at past results. The bottom line, I'm gonna say this right now. Adam, I hope you're listening. I hope Rider Nation is listening. Cody Fajardo is your team MVP this year.
I think it's Mario Alford, but
Well, okay.
and and I
If you
think
want to put
and to be fair, I didn't think that until Adam suggested it when we were chatting the other day. I think it makes a ton of sense because he's had a couple big returns for them.
right, but if you look at the heart and soul of a team, it makes me very disappointed when a fan base it seems to think that it's the quarterback's fault every single time. It's his fault that the receiver dropped the ball on the 2-yard line when it's wide open. All he had to do is open his hands. It's his fault that the receiver stopped running on a ball that was had going out of bounds and was alertly intercepted. It's his fault that 3 running backs go down, including the starting running back Keenan LaFrance this week. It's his fault that the offensive line can't keep him upright. At some point, there has to be some reflection, but this isn't just about Cody Fajardo and all. When did team sports become about one individual? At that chat, there's no I in team, only an individual. The riders need to wear this as a team. Their management needs to realize their faults. And quite honestly, I think they got too much pride to realize it. Craig Dickinson lost the room weeks ago when it came to discipline, contrary to what he's saying. To me, I just don't see any way about this. If you blow this playoff lead that you had, which was 6 or 8 points, completely unacceptable. If you find a way to miss the playoffs, that is a house cleaning from top to bottom with whatever chemical you want to use to get rid of the stench.
I like what Trey put in the chat, which he's started the motion for Gainer the Gopher as the Riders MOP, citing he's put in a work pumping up the crowd this year when it's been hard to do so. Seems like we've got a couple people in the chat on board with that one as well. Just to wrap this up, you know what this performance by Fajardo reminded me of? This reminded me of vintage Michael Riley, a guy that
Yeah, yeah,
tried to put the
100%.
team on his back. Would run with the ball to do so. Sometimes ill-advised, even Riley, not well advised in a lot of those situations, but trying to will his team to win. Unfortunately, it did not go that way for the Riders this week. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk about one who had a bit of a bounce back game this week, and that was Vernon Adams Jr., who put up a solid 300-yard passing day, 2 touchdowns, his first 2 with the Alouettes, and no picks this week against the Ottawa Red Blacks. So, and they put up a 34-19 win. Seems like the team got back on track. That being said, they were playing Ottawa. So my quick question for you here, good sir, is Vernon Adams back? Was this the start of a resurgence for the BC Lions, or is this a one-off against a bad team?
Start of a resurgence. Okay, well, let's look at this one of 2 ways. They split with Calgary, correct?
I think they have 2 wins. Calgary has 1, so they've got the season series.
But with the home and home recently was
Yes,
split, right?
yes, yeah.
Okay, and then this type of performance. To be blunt, I'm not sure this is the start of a resurgence rather than Vernon Adams taking care of business this week and doing what he should have done and doing what he did and what he should have done. And that's win against a football team that he has no business losing to. The thing that he has to keep in mind is he needs to follow this up. It's he's too much talent. He's way too talented to be consistently inconsistent. He looked like he was an MOP last week, while the week before it didn't look very good. So Vernon Adams at height of good Vernon Adams gets 2 thumbs up. Vernon Adams low in games where he doesn't play well and gets benched is the low part of this game. The problem with Vernon Adams, and I think something that he has to juggle with, is his highs are too high, his lows are too low. He has to figure out how to manage that. Is he bad? Sure, he won a game, but he should have won. Show me in Calgary. show me in Winnipeg. I think these Winnipeg games, next week, for part of me doesn't want the Bombers to clinch first in the West this week because I want at least one of those BC games to mean something. Just for the sole purpose that I think that first game wasn't an exact indication about how Winnipeg and BC are and how close they actually are. I want to see this team play, these two teams, Winnipeg, BC, at least one game with some significant implications, maybe even two. Because everybody said, yeah, BC is close to Winnipeg, BC is close to Winnipeg. But the score says that the game was a blowout the last time these two teams played. So that's different. That was Nathan Ward. This is Vernon Adams. Vernon Adams has all the talent in the world. He just has to find a little more consistency in his game, and his highs better not be so high. Better yet, his lows better not be so low. So he's better off trending in the middle. And sure, I hate to say it, Vernon Adams, the game manager, sounds good. His old monitor came back though this week, but that's not going to work in the playoffs. And I think if BC is going to find their way back into this playoff scenario, the only way I see it happening is if BC plays that West semifinal at home.
Yeah.
I don't think BC is capable of winning two road games to get to the Grey Cup and then the Grey Cup.
No, I agree, and I agree with your assessment of Vernon Adams Jr. as well. That he's got high highs and low lows, it seems, and it's very inconsistent at times. I think this was a good building block. It's hard to know how much to make off of a win against Ottawa. Show me against Toronto, the team currently sitting first in the East Division. I think they play each other this coming week. That if he can string together another solid game there. Again, he got a little bit involved in the Russian game, not as much as I thought he would. But certainly this is a good sign for the team as a whole. Like not only Vernon Adams Jr., but James Butler was running well again this week. Some of the receivers, Lucky Whitehead, Dominic Rhymes got back on track. I know Whitehead did go down due to injury though, so maybe that's another piece they're missing. Hence why, maybe my suggestion earlier on in the show about Darvin Adams as a trade deadline acquisition makes sense for BC, depending how that injury is. I know he's not the same type of player, obviously, but they could maybe use some wide receiver help. A good building block this week. We will see what they build off of in the coming games against stronger teams. So I think is the fair assessment on this one. And the team they're going to be playing this upcoming week is the Toronto Argonauts, who this week the storyline for them is it was all defense. It was no offense. They scored their season low 2 points. I think that might be a league-wide season low, not even managing a field goal. Two singles. I don't think we had a shutout. I don't think we had any single points this season. 2 points on the week for the Toronto Argonauts. Their defense did it again. You guys talked about this last week on the show about how their defense seems to make miraculous plays, put up huge fantasy totals, which is good for me. I like that. But
you're talking to somebody that had Calgary's defense in the lineup. So
yeah, exactly. You get it. But it just seems like this week, it seems like most weeks they struggle to put a ton of touchdowns on the board offensively. This week they couldn't even put up a field goal. So what happened here for the Argos this week against a passing defense that normally you can put up a ton against in Calgary? I don't know what it was. Do you think there's anything to the gamesmanship between Toronto and Calgary, sharing so many former players of one another? Is that outlandish to think, or what happened here that they just couldn't get anything done offensively?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I hope this is a one-off. I want to see the follow-up. The suggestion that I have is if the Toronto defense doesn't force turnovers and give adequate field position to that offense, I don't think that offense is good enough to win a game on its own. I think the defense can try for 2.5 quarters like they did to keep this a football game. But there comes a point where you're just on the field so much that it just doesn't work. Now, one off, possible. What's the follow up look like? And now is there some question about the Argos playing a West team in potentially the Grey Cup? Because we were ready to anoint the Argos the top team in the East. Now, let's see. Because they played a top 4 team in the CFL. They themselves, in my mind, are a top 4 team. I will get the power rankings later. But I think this is a preemptive warning shot to the Argos that the West ain't the East, and you better be playing at your best, or you're going to end up with 2 points. Plain and simple.
To me, it's a question mark of the offensive game plan in this game. We've talked many times in recent weeks about AJ Ouellette in that run game and getting him involved more in that. They throw a lot of dump passes to him, but they don't run the ball much. And he had 9 carries for 66 yards. He averaged 7.3 yards per carry in this game. And it's not like this game was out of reach early on. Like it was a 0-0 game in the at the end of the first quarter. Okay, Calgary scored 14 at half in the second quarter. 14-2 at halftime. No scoring at all in the third. We're going into the third quarter. You're down by 12. Like, you can't tell me the Argos, if they were running the ball this well, couldn't have given the ball to Ouellette a couple more times to open things up for that offense. They have so many talented receivers available, but you got to do the two-way game here a little bit, and we could talk on and on every week about the run game here. It's one of Trey's keys to the game, run the ball. I don't think the Argos did that very well this week, and I think that bit them here in a game that was close early on. It was a tight defensive battle in this one, and their defense did everything they could. I mean, they held Jake Mayer to under 200 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions, but not enough when your offense is only putting 2 points up on the board. And when your offense gives the other team points in the form of a pick six, that also does not help for your team. Well, those are our top storylines for week number 17 in the CFL. Let's move on and take a look at the fantasy, the betting results, power rankings, all that fun stuff to wrap it up here. And let's take a look at our fantasy league results here. The CFL Podcast Fantasy League. Myself, Adam, and Trey have been playing in this, but against others from around this other CFL podcast all season long. Final week of the regular season this week, where Adam put up a big win over Oz from Rouge, White, and Blue with 94.8 points on the week, put up 10 to finish the season, 10-6 on the year, and in 5th place. I'm going to skip over Trey for a second here and come back to him. Myself, I put up 85.8 points this week. I did lose to the guys from the X's and Argos podcast. 12-4 record for me on the season. I finished 2nd place because Andrew from the Turf District did finish 1 win ahead of me and claimed the regular season crown. Trey had the bye week this week, but those points count towards the tiebreakers. 87.7 points for him. A solid week for him. An 8-8 game, or 8-8 on the season, falls just outside of the playoffs at 9th place here because of some absurdity to end the season. There was about a 4-5-way tie coming into the final week of potentially.
Trey gonna be on your case, Mr. Commissioner, about a play-in round.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there is no play-in round, but no, Brazilian tie from 2 and out. The CFL podcast needed the win, to beat Trey in the tiebreaker this week. Put up the highest total out of anybody participating all week. Travis from 2 and out also needed a key win. Won his matchup by 0.6 points on a Luther Hakunavanu catch with less than a minute left in the game to knock Trey out of the playoffs and claim the final 2 playoff spots there. So It just wasn't meant to be so many things. All you needed, Trey, was
I
just
think
a little bit
Trey,
more from Jake Mayer, a little bit more from Reggie Bagleton, but Luther Hakunavanu, of all people, was the one to unfortunately knock Trey out of the playoffs. So his fantasy season here is done. Adam and I do move on to the playoffs this week. We're down to the final 8 teams over the next 3 weeks, and we'll see if one of us can bring home the title for the Canadian Football Countdown.
it's interesting because I think Trey feels exactly the way the Toronto Blue Jays felt last season, missing the playoffs by 1 game and a bunch of stuff happening on the last day of the season. The good news is, Trey, the Blue Jays are in this weekend to start the playoffs, potentially at home. And as Trey says in the comments, now I can focus on NFL and NHL fantasy. Yes, until the next heartbreak. And that's the problem when you play in so many fantasy leagues. You're darned to get on the short end of the stick of a lot of things. But that's the way she goes.
Well, speaking of multiple fantasy leagues in our season-long podcast fantasy league, here's some good news for Mr. Trey Colbeck, who officially moves up into 3rd place in the season totals, passing Adam. This week's results, Mike, you had the highest score at 103.3. Tell us a little bit about your lineup this week and
Yeah,
what you
my
did.
lineup had Colaros, Oliveira, Rhymes, Henry, Schoen, Beatty, and the Calgary defense. Very, very good week for me, aided by Zach Colaros and Brady Oliveira. Also had 100-yard games from Dalton Schoen, and I think Rhymes also had a 100-yard game, just inside or outside 100-yard games. The problem is I did a lot of 100-yard games, but I don't get the touchdowns from my receivers.
Yeah, that's where I get my big points every week. I
Well,
seem to always get those
your big
touchdowns.
points were in the first 9 weeks when you had a quarterback who I'm convinced is not human, leading the way for you. So as far as I'm concerned, the title was wrapped up for you 9 weeks into the season,
Yeah, basically. Now we're just playing for fun.
and now you're just hoarding a bunch of keepers for next year.
Oh yeah, that's exactly the plan. Trey did finish second this week, though, 97.2 points, just behind you. Vernon Adams Jr., AJ Ouellette, a huge game by Nick Dembski, Devaris Daniels, Reggie Bagleton, Sean White, and the Hamilton defense, even though they were on a bye. So would have actually beat you if he put Winnipeg's defense in this week. But still a second place finish for Trey. Myself, 77.6, not my best week. Taylor Cornelius, Kevin Brown, Dylan Mitchell, Curly Gittins Jr., Eugene Lewis, Rene Paredes, and the Argos D for me. No huge performances, but some decent ones there. Adam, rough week again, 32.5 points for him. McLeod Bethel Thompson had a terrible day. Keenan LaFrance, Brandon Banks, DeMonte Coxey, Lucky Whitehead, Brett Waters, Saskatchewan's defense made up Adams' total roster there. Richard in the chat asks, who has Lewis Ward? I did earlier in the season. I dropped him. I believe Adam might have him on his roster right now. Season totals on the year, I'm at 1634.1. Mike, you are in second at 1463.1. Trey in third at 1189 and Adam at 1176.2. While the other league does end the regular season at this point, we're going all the way to week 21. So 4 weeks to see if y'all can catch me here in the standings. But good luck with that. Let's move on to take a look at our betting results this week. And our betting results betting segment is brought to you by BetStamp. BetStamp's free app that helps you find the best value for your online sports betting wagers. It provides you comparisons of the best odds across a variety of different sports books, including the BetStamp recommended best odds, which we use every week for our CFL picks against the spread on our Wednesday night preview show. Trey, Adam, and myself. You can learn more at betstamp.app. Sign up with referral code CFC to take a look at those every single week. Now, taking a look at how we did this past week, 2 and 2 weeks for Trey and myself. We both picked Winnipeg at -8.5 and BC at -6.5 and got those right. We took Edmonton plus 3.5 and Toronto at plus 6.5 and got those wrong. Adam agreed with us on the last 3 games, but did take his beloved Saskatchewan Roughriders at plus 8.5, which did not hit. So 2 and 2 weeks for Trey and me, 1 and 3 week for Adam, and consensus picks on the week. We went 2 and 2 as well. Overall totals on the year: Trey is at 38 and 27. I am at 35 and 30. Adam 32 and 33. And since we started tracking our picks on BetStamp, our consensus picks have been 20 and 17. So making a little bit of money still if you follow along with our consensus picks here. And I believe 21 games left to pick in the regular season. So we'll see where we finish off at the end of the year here. Remember, keep it fun, just for fun, and always bet responsibly. Do not bet the farm or anything else of extreme value to you. Let's take a look at our players of the week here, and we'll start off with, Mike, you decided to cause some chaos this week, so tell us why your player of the week, again, player of the week, is an entire football team.
Yeah, I'm taking a note from our pal Adam, who is known as Farmer in Saskatchewan on YouTube. You can see him in the comments. By the way, puts great videos and content together, so I encourage everybody to check it out. So in his power rankings, he always seems to add a team that, deserves to be higher than, well, in some cases, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, in other cases, the Edmonton Elks. So I thought to myself, how can I enter this game of a little bit of chaos? So, as for reasons that have already been discussed on this show, 5 wins in the last 6 games, a team that seems to be headed in the right direction, has a very underrated defense and a quarterback that is not turning the ball over, plus a team that is starting to use their receivers more effectively, plus they're getting some help down the stretch, presumably in William Standback, which I think is going to make them even more dangerous, because I think that's the lone thing separating me from considering the Montreal Alouettes as the top team in the East.
Well, the rest of us followed the rules of player of the week.
Oh, I didn't know there were rules. Sorry, Ryan.
Hey, I'm back now. We got to get this house back in order now that I've returned. No, it's I'll allow it. But I went with Vernon Adams Jr. as my player of the week. Again, 77.3% completion rate, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I even added almost 40 yards on the ground. I liked what I saw from him. Again, is this the real deal for the rest of the season? I don't know, but something to build off of, a bit of a confidence booster here as well for him. Adam gave his player of the week on the defensive side of the ball to Cam Judge from the Calgary Stampeders. He had 6 tackles, had an interception for a touchdown. Again, huge defensive effort to win that game for Calgary. And who did Trey have as his player of the week? Mike, you want to give that one?
Yeah, sure. Trey picked a guy that's very near and dear to my heart. Dalton Schoen, 4 catches on 8 targets for 125 and 1 touchdown. Some consternation going on in the chat about what happens if Dalton Schoen catches, those 4 targets. Let's get this clear. 125 yards on 4 catches. Let's not get overly greedy here. As much as my fantasy team would have enjoyed that, to put more of a lead on everybody this week. But you know what, Dalton Schoen, it's exactly what I said earlier. And if Trey hadn't picked Dalton Schoen, I probably would have. Not a lot of catches, but when he makes the catches, especially of late, um, he makes them.
Yeah, yeah, he does. And he did make a couple big ones this week, get that big touchdown there. This may be the first time we've all given our player of the week to a different game. We covered all 4 games with our players of the week this week. Let's round things out with our power rankings here. I'll give mine first. I've got Winnipeg at number 1, BC at number 2. Again, big win over Ottawa this week. I think they're more likely to finish with that home playoff game, which bodes well for them, I think, in a matchup with Calgary. So I have them at 2. Although Calgary big win this week. I'm not dealing with those simulation odds. I disagree. I'm going Calgary as number 3 for me. Bumped Montreal up to number 4 because they've been on that roll lately, and Toronto had that ugly loss this week, so they fall to number 5. Hamilton sits around 6. Not much to say on them after a bye week. I do have Edmonton at 7 and Saskatchewan at 8, even though Edmonton's playoff hopes are obviously bleaker. I put them there because I feel like Edmonton is closer to where I think they should be at this point in the season. I expected them to, get a bit better as the season went on, but probably still miss the playoffs, where I had such higher expectations for Saskatchewan. So I put Edmonton because I feel like they're on the track where this year wasn't meant to be a playoff year for Edmonton. It's building for next year. So I put them at 7. And Ottawa, another ugly loss. You fired your coach. You deserve 9th in my rankings there. What do you have this week, Mike?
Yeah, I had Winnipeg, Calgary, Toronto, BC, Montreal, Hamilton, Edmonton, Saskatchewan, Ottawa. The gap between Saskatchewan and Ottawa for 8 and 9 has gotten a lot smaller in recent weeks.
Yeah, and looking at Adam's rankings here, he's got Calgary at number 1, Winnipeg at 2. So Adam, I guess maybe he's the one who wrote the simulation article for the CFL, because he's got Calgary at number 1. I did question him on that this week when he sent that in, and he said they've been playing better football, and for a full 60 minutes. Calgary's D has been stronger lately. Winnipeg has scored a lot, but not dominating defense. Okay, I can agree with the take. That's the beauty of these power rankings, is that we all have different takes on them, and it's interesting to say, which team is ahead of another, not just based on record here. So he's got Winnipeg at 2, BC at 3, Montreal at 4, Toronto 5. Hamilton at 6, Saskatchewan at 7, Edmonton at 8, and as Adam does, throwing another team in there, the Western Mustangs make number 9 this week after their 47-14 win versus McMaster. They're ranked number 1 in youth sports, which puts them ahead of the Ottawa Red Blacks. What did Trey have for his power rankings this week, Mike?
Winnipeg, BC, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton, Edmonton, Ottawa, Saskatchewan. Can't really argue with any of that, although I'm pretty sure just getting back to Adam's rankings, the Western Mustangs could both beat Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Ottawa Red Blacks a pretty good game. And by pretty good game, I think they could keep it within 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. Do you want to go through Trey's rankings here?
Yeah, I read them, yeah.
No. Shows how much I'm paying attention. There's a lot of things happening in the chat. Richard says he's looking forward to you, Mike, being forced to switch BC and Toronto after they play next week. And sounds like we may have Adam singing some Shania Twain on the podcast in upcoming weeks. So look forward to all of that. You can catch, our power rankings every week. If you want to ask Adam, if you want to ask Trey about theirs, you can find them on Twitter at AdamStewart1, at Trey MB Hardis for all of their CFL takes. I think that does it for tonight. Let me just find the wrap-up slides here and take a look at what's coming next on the podcast. We've got our Week 18 preview coming Wednesday night. The band is back together again for the Wednesday night preview show, where we'll take a look at each of the games, talk CFL fantasy options, and make our picks against the spread. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Winnipeg time, 8 p.m. Saskatchewan. Adjust to your other time zones accordingly still for another month. I looked it up today. The time change is until November. I thought it's normally early October, but nope, it's November this year, so another month of separate time zones here. So we'll be talking through all of that Wednesday night. Adam, Trey, myself. And then on Monday night, we'll be back again, Thanksgiving Monday, I believe, with our Week 18 recap, or we'll do the same thing here, talk about the major storylines, players of the week, power rankings, all that fun stuff. You can catch all these shows and more live every week over on a variety of platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and the Game Time TV YouTube page, all made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV, which you can learn more about at GameTimeTV.ca or by following on Facebook at Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find the podcast on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod. Make sure you check out all the other great shows from around the Canadian Football Podcast Network as well. Mike, you've got a lot of things going on these days. You're a busy man. You haven't slept in like 48 hours or something stupid like that. So before you say goodnight and go to bed, where can people find everything you're going on whenever you wake up next?
Yeah, chances are I told you I was gonna have a nap between when I texted you this afternoon and about 45 minutes before the show, but that didn't happen. You can find me on Twitter at Mikegerl, Mikegerl. You can find my work stuff, watch.gametimetv.ca. Bomber fans might want to get excited because I have a little something in the works.
Ooh.
So stay tuned.
That's exciting. Can't wait to find out what that might be. You can find me on Twitter at CooperTrooper42. It starts with a K if you want to talk CFL, CFL Fantasy. If you want to talk about NFL Fantasy, NFL, I've been getting more into that this season. Mike, I started Marcus Mariota as my quarterback in NFL Fantasy this week over Russell Wilson because I had enough of Russell Wilson. Cooler heads did prevail. I didn't cut him. I put him on my bench. I unfortunately had to let go of Jahan Dotson instead, who did score a touchdown this week. So that was painful. But boy, am I glad cooler heads prevailed and I kept Russ after Mariota only put up 3 points on the week. But I still won my matchup because the guy I was playing against had Alvin Kamara, who was ruled out with an injury 20 minutes before the early 8:30 in the morning Sunday games. So I will take the victory where I can get it. So,
Could I give a really quick shout out just while it's on my mind?
sure.
Okay, so everybody, I know this isn't a CFL related thing, but it's NFL related. Guys, one of the best NFL radio announcers is Paul Allen. He's the voice of the Vikings. Producer Eric, who was filling in on the editing side, was a very happy man. Anyway, the Minnesota Vikings played in London this weekend. Will Lutz tried a 62-yard field goal to try to tie. And what happened is the field goal went off. One of the goal posts came down, hit the side crossbar. And the radio call of Paul Allen, you can find us on awfulannouncing.com. The radio call of Paul Allen in this sequence is not to be believed. He says something to the effect of, it's the double doink, it's the double doink, and the Saints can go marching out. And I literally watched that thing 16 times. I'm not going to imitate it by screaming, but I will suggest that people watch this call because it is unreal. If you want to talk about broadcaster reactions to certain moments, oh my goodness. Go watch it. Sounds like there was another fan on the field incident on Monday Night Football tonight. Look for a radio gold call by Kevin Harlan as well. I just love announcers when they show their passion for their team, and I'm so glad CFL announcers can do that too. Go, Paul Allen. You are one of my favorite NFL announcers. Hope to meet you one day. Keep up the great work. Again, the double doink and the Saints can go marching out.
That was the most absurd. That was one of the only NFL, like I don't watch a lot of actual NFL action. I watched most of that game. Most absurd ending I've seen with making a 61-yard field goal and then missing from 62 or whatever it was shortly after that to off the post. You couldn't write it anywhere better. Not a bad game for the game in London there. You can, as I
It's
mentioned,
reminding me here just that apparently I made him jump at the game last night, which is true with one of my reactions. So maybe we'll have to get a camera on me for a hockey game, an ISO cam.
oh yes, let's do it. You can find Trey on Twitter at TreyMBHarness. You can find Adam at Adam Stewart 1. Also, quick shout out to intern Eric, who filled in with editing and running the show behind the scenes for me the past couple of weeks while I was away. So first of all, thank you to Eric, and I believe he's been involved with some of your hockey broadcasts as well. So we love to see it here. Shout out to him. For all the help he's given along the way here as well. And yeah, I think that's it for this week. You can find podcasts on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod, Facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod there as well. Whatever podcast platform you're listening on, we appreciate if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends, help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. And on behalf of Trey and Adam, who joined us in the chat this evening, everybody who joined us here tonight in the chat as well, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for all the fun comments all evening long. On behalf of Michael Garrell, I'm Ryan Coop saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.